What is a time when you really weren't supposed to laugh but just couldn't help yourself? I was at summer camp as a kid, and one of the other kids there seemed to have a slight learning disability. There was a fly buzzing around his head and he smacked himself in the forehead as hard as he could to try to kill the fly. He missed the fly and knocked himself backwards off the bench. I had to walk away, but I was laughing so hard I could barely see. During sixth form art lessons, my teacher got angry. He had a habit of ranting, getting angry with his own rants, then blowing up. It was quite the entertaining spectacle. One time he was pissed off at the class for taking the afternoon so lightly. He angrily ranted his way into his deep passion of art, then stated, "When I see this rock, I don't see a rock. I see art. It drives me. It turns me on." Well, in the silent pause that followed as he realized his phrasing, I let out a single sharp snigger which erupted the class into hysterics. He nearly chucked me off the course. I was in dental school. We were placing 2 implants on this 70-something old veteran guy. I was just assisting. Placing dental implants is like screwing in a lag bolt. First you drill a hole in the bone, then you screw in the implant. The dentist who was doing the procedure was drilling the hole into the bone, and he just about got the drill as deep as he wanted it, but the bone hardened up and the drill was slowing down. He looks at me and says, "The bone is just too hard down there." We still have the drill in the guy's mouth, but he starts flapping it up and down and making noises like he wants to say something. The dentist pulls the drill out of his bone and the patient immediately blurts out, "That's what she said." The dentist and I just looked at each other and bust up laughing. It's one of my favorite experiences from working on someone. Took my GF to the ballet. Not really my cup of tea, but she was a dancer and knew she'd enjoy it. Surprisingly got quite into it as it went on, until someone in the audience let out a supersonic fart. We were easily 20 rows away and felt the shock waves as it blew past us. We both looked at each other and tried not to laugh, but we broke down in full hysterics. Weirdly, we got more dirty looks and a worse reaction than the farter. Sad story of my sister-in-law being a victim of the opioid crisis. She loved life and had a dark sense of humor. I was with my wife and her parents at the funeral home going over the details. My mother-in-law pulls out her checkbook to write the check for the funeral director. It is check number 666. We all have a good laugh. Sil would have loved it. The director didn't know what to make of us. My great-aunt Min's funeral, roughly 30 years ago in northern New Jersey. Go ahead and do the accents in your head. You won't be exaggerating. First, we're walking in with my grandmother, who was in early stage dementia and keeps asking where we are. We keep telling her. She keeps asking. Finally, in frustration, my mother raises her voice and says, "Your sister, Min, is having a funeral." So my grandmother says, in this really affronted voice, "Well, what is she doing that for?" Then we're seated and nothing happens for 20 minutes until finally the rabbi, approximately 150 years old, comes shuffling in. He makes his way up to the lectern and says, "I'm sorry I'm late. I was in a car accident." This other driver cuts me off and this lady behind me says, absolutely deadpan, "So what are we, the insurance adjusters?" 100% true story. We started a band with some friends when was in 8th grade. I was getting okay-ish at guitar and another friend played bass. A super confident friend of ours decided he was going to be the lead singer, so we decided to bring our instruments and stay up all night at his place to work on some stuff. The bassist and I learned what was at the time the brand new single "Stay Together for the Kids" by Blink-182. Now, we hadn't heard the singer do his thing. He needed us to be playing while he did. Sure, whatever. So after we learned it, we were ready for a run-through. And that's when it happened. He let out an out-of-pitch falsetto yell during the chorus, squeaking here and there. It sounded like frozen hash browns in a blender. It was just so unexpected because the kid was so sure of himself. The bassist and I stopped dead, looked at each other and laughed. He cried and ran upstairs. "Sorry, Brendan." High school English class. A few days before I got in trouble for sleeping in and just barely making it on time to my first period class. I was called a hibernating bear by my teacher, which I found funny. A few days later we're doing oral book reports. There was this kid who had a stutter who was doing his report. He was struggling, but the class was being patient with him. Then he got to a point in his report where he started talking about a bear in his book, stuttering along. Remembering just a few days before how I was called a bear for sleeping in and how funny I thought that was, I busted up laughing. The entire class gasped in horror at me. I was not laughing at the kid for stuttering, but I realized that's exactly what it looked like, so I didn't even try to defend myself. A few years ago, there was this singing event at my dad's church, so he made me, my mom, and my brother go. We are not Christian like him. So we're sitting in the church and people are singing, and then this lady comes up. I look at the program and the song she's gonna sing is called How Beautiful Are the Feet. I was like, this is gonna be good, and I look at my mom and brother and they seem to be just as ready to hear the song as me. So this lady starts singing in the most boisterous, obnoxious, loud, shaky, operatic voice I've ever heard. How beautiful are the feet of God EXC. I started laughing hysterically. I looked at my brother and he was laughing too. I looked at my mom and she was trying her best to stay straight-faced. We all ended up laughing in my dad's church that night. Thanksgiving dinner a few years back, and I was only about 6 or 7. Very large family, all crowded in around my grandparents' dining room table. One of my cousins had brought her new kitten that year and it was supposed to stay out of the house in a back room. She was kinda sneaky, and she brought it in and hid it under the table. We are all gathered around. Grandfather is doing one of those long prayers, on, and I can see my cousin quietly playing with the kitten with her feet under the table. The kitten is play fighting with her big toe and must have bitten pretty deep because cousin jerked her foot back. Kitten fell backwards, bumped its head on the table leg with a thump, then raised one little paw to its ear, like oh. I wanted to bust out laughing, but painfully held it in until the end of that long prayer. My ex-wife, wife at the time, she was ragging on me about something I will never be able to remember. She'd get that way. A few beers, then the jealousy and the screaming. I'd put myself on a daily regime of cannabis to adjust to the onslaught of weirdness. But anyway, one night she's scarily fucking angry and arguing at me about something, and the whole situation was just so absurd, and my THC count so high that I felt laughter bubbling up. I did the only thing I could think of. I started pinching my thigh skin, like break the skin kind of a pinch, and held on until she was done sniping at me. The awesome wave of pain nicely cancelled out the laughter, but golly gee was that a close one. A few weeks ago I went to the christening of the baby of one of my work friends. All her family and friends were there. They carried the baby to the front of the church and we sang some hymns and a prayer was said. But as my friend went to hand baby over to the vicar to be christened, the baby must have sensed that something unpleasant was about to happen, as she had a firm hold of my friend's dress, so much so that as the vicar took her in his arms, baby Mary pulled down the front of mummy's dress and her right boobie popped out. The thing was that she didn't notice for a second or two until the vicar whispered in her ear. She quickly tucked it back in, but by then it was too late. I know she's my friend and I shouldn't have laughed, but it was hilarious. The whole congregation had gone from a www to a gasp of shock in literally a second as my friend turned bright red with embarrassment. My friend had gotten hurt really bad and his arm was bleeding and I was laughing too much to stop. I was trying to calm down but I couldn't, and then I finally calmed down when he smacked me. So my granddad, being in his late 90s, has some incontinence issues. He does his best to deal with it but doesn't always make it to the bathroom in time. One day his wife, my grandma, got angry about something unrelated and told him to piss off. He goes away to the bedroom. When he doesn't come back after a bit, she checks on him. He peed himself in their bed. Upon her finding him, he looks her dead in the eye and just goes, "Are you happy now?" I know I shouldn't have laughed, but I lost it. I love my granddad. This is actually 120% in character for him. He used to be a huge prankster when he was a bit younger.